We're going to continue our discussion about the different worms in the following two phylums. And this one is going to be the phylum Nematoda. It's the middle section of the notes page that I gave to you. All of the nematodes are going to be roundworms. Remember, the platyhelminths were all flatworms that we looked at yesterday in terms of the planaria, the tapeworm, and the liver fluke. And the roundworms are going to be not flat, they're going to be round. So have that note sheet out or whatever form of notes you're taking so that you can complete the information that's required. Here we go. So the phylum Nematoda and some of the platyhelminths are going to be parasitic, which means that they're parasites. They need a host to feed off of in order to survive. And obviously, being a parasite, they're actually going to be a damaging organism to their host. So they're going to either take away the nutrients and nourishment that their host is currently needing in order for them to survive. So that is something that most roundworms are parasitic. The ones we're going to talk about are mostly parasites, and the tapeworm and the liver fluke, like I shared with you, those samples in class, those are going to be also parasitic. So here is all of the information. If you are not in school today, please do pause this video so that you can get all of the information down and then resume it so you can hear me explain what these things mean at this time. Okay, so now that you have all of the information, let's discuss the characteristics of the organisms that fit into this phylum. So in the phylum Nematoda, just like the platyhelminths, you have their bodies are protected by a cuticle, which is that thicker-like tissue that will surround their entire body and protect their systems. Remember, they have bilateral symmetry as well, so that means that they're going to have cephalization once again, as well as some complex organ systems. They also have a muscular pharynx, like I showed you yesterday with the platyhelminths, but they actually have. It's interesting because it's closer to the front of their body versus where in the platyhelminths it kind of is in their lower extremities of their body. The nervous system actually has these nervous rings of tissue around the pharynx. There still is two long lateral nerve cords that go the length of their body, and they have cephalization once again, so that sensory organs are concentrated around their head. They reproduce sexually. They actually have separate sexes. So you're going to have a female roundworm and a male roundworm, and there's external fertilization though. So what will happen is there still needs to be a female and a male roundworm, but they will externally fertilize the eggs that the female will have. For circulation and respiration, remember respiration is the exchanging of gases, and the circulation is the movement of fluids throughout it, is going to happen through diffusion once again. So things are going to move from areas of high concentration to low concentration. The way that they get rid of their waste, they actually have these specialized canals that are just below their mouth. They're excretory canals. So they're kind of like um, holes or pathways right below the mouth of the roundworm to get rid of the waste. And they are very, very commonly known to have these frantic thrashing motions. And this is due to the shape of their body and that thick cuticle layer. I'll show you a video in a moment that you'll see how they move. So when you think of worms that have thrashing movements and are frantic and are parasitic, I want you to think about the nematoda or the roundworms. And this just illustrates the cuticles, that outer covering of their body. Now, the phylum Annelida, or the annelids, are going to be our segmented worms. So segments are smaller pieces that make up a whole, right? So all of the worms that are in the phylum Annelida are segmented worms, and you can kind of see it in this picture. You'll be able to see it better in the video. Like if you look, there's like little, it looks like almost like lines that are drawn on this earthworm here. and that is the different segments. So any worms that are round and have specific segments like this are going to be part of this phylum. So the things that make annelids kind of in their own separate category is that they have, like I mentioned, the segments, and we're going to call those the septa. So when we actually are dissecting the earthworm, I'm going to ask you to count how many septa are on your worm, and it's going to vary from one lab station to the next. This is asking you to count their body segments. So when we're talking about segma, I'm looking for you to count from line to line, basically. So in this earthworm, you can see that there, if you start from where you can really see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So you would count each of those different septa. So once again, this is going to be all of the information. If you're not in class today, just go ahead and pause this so you can get all of the information down on your note sheet. This should be the last phylum on your note sheet, and that is the phylum Annelida. So pause now if you need to get this information down. So as you can notice once again that the bodies of this phylum are also protected by a cuticle. So these certain characteristics are what make each of these phylum like worm phylums, but I'm hoping that you're starting to see some distinguishing characteristics. The annelids actually have two sets of muscles. They have longitudinal muscles, so it goes the length of their bodies, as well as circular, so it goes around, which is actually going to give them a different motion than the platyhelminths, like the planaria that we observed in class, or the video of the nematodas that I'm going to share with you. You may also be wondering how these organisms move through dirt, because the most commonly known annelid is the earthworm. And if you think about it, the earthworms live deep in the soil where there's a lot of moisture, hopefully, for plant life and the earthworms alike. And what they actually have is their entire body is covered in these things called setae. And we're going to feel them when we dissect the earthworms in class. They feel almost like rough little bumps that run underneath their bodies, which help with movement. It kind of gives them some friction while they're moving through the wet, moist soil. They do have a complete digestive system. So, what this means is that they have two distinct ends. They have a mouth where the food goes in, and they have an anus where the waste leaves. So, it's on opposite ends of the organism. It's a complete digestive system if it just goes in one direction. So, it enters in through the mouth and it exits through the anus. They do have a specialized pharynx. It's not going to be something that they're going to excrete out of their bodies. The pharynx is actually located inside of the earthworm, as well as a stomach and a gizzard, which is going to be very similar to a bird's gizzard that is in charge of grinding up all of those dirts and minerals that they eat as they work their way through the soil. And finally, they have an intestine where things are digested. So you can see out of the three phyla of worms, the annelids are the most complex. They have that complete digestive system. They too have bilateral symmetry because that's a true characteristic of all of these. So they are going to have that cephalization. They actually have ganglia in the head, which is connected to the ventral nerve cord and nerves. So it's not necessarily a brain, but we're getting much more sophisticated in terms of being able to not only detect light, but also like the moisture in the soil and be able to detect like the direction that they need to go. The circulatory system is closed, which actually means that there's blood that's contained in the vessels. So there's actually a specific type of heart chambers that will pump, and it will go through the vessels all the way through the worm and then come back. So it's not just free flowing like some of our other organisms and invertebrates that we're going to get to as we move through the different phyla. They actually respire or breathe through their skin. They don't have lungs, but they exchange gases through their skin. And when they get rid of their waste, it happens through the nephridia. That's the portion of the earthworm where the waste will exit. And the interesting thing about earthworms is or annelids, sorry, I shouldn't just say earthworms because there's several different kinds of segmented worms that fall underneath the phylum Annelida. but some can regenerate, and earthworms are an example that can regenerate. So if they are severed, just like the planaria, if they're severed, they can grow any part back that was damaged. However, they will reproduce sexually, just like the nematodas. So you're going to need two worms to create offspring. Speaking of earthworms specifically, they are hermaphroditic. So every earthworm has female and male reproductive parts, and they will be able to, two earthworms can make new earthworms. It doesn't matter if it's one gender or not, because they have both. And just one picture that I did want to share with you is you can see this is an earthworm egg in someone's hand, and you can kind of see the size of how small they start off before they become the long critical organisms to many ecosystems. So I'm also going to attach to the 3.4 notes page on the Google Classroom, or the assignment rather, the variety of videos that we are going to watch in class, or if you just want to rewatch them, or if you were not absent, if you were absent and need to rewatch them. I'm going to post a video on how nematodes move and their frantic thrashing motion, as well as how the annelids move, so you can kind of see the difference between the two. As always, rewatch this video or re-listen anytime you need any further clarification.